intense.
Check one.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and everyone. I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, Commissioner Vice Chair Maestas, looks like you're holding the fort down by yourself up there.
I am, but I'm also joined by some folks here in the gallery, so I'm not totally by my lonesome.
I'm glad, and I'm sorry I'm not with you there today, but I'll make amends in the future. I think we should get started. It's 9 o'clock. I'm Cynthia Hall, Chair of the New Mexico Public Regulation Committee. Wait, are we on the record yet? Let me wait. Can you get us on the record and then I'll go? Okay, great. Thank you. Good morning.
Yes.
It's 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm Cynthia Hall, Chair of the Public Regulation Commission. Today is Wednesday, October 26th, 2022. And this is our regular weekly open meeting of the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. And I'd like to call the meeting to order and have our roll call of commissioners.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair. I can
Thank
take the roll call this morning. Commissioner Maestas,
Present.
Commissioner Fishman,
Here.
Commissioner Byrd,
I'm a present.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Here.
Commissioner Hall.
Here.
5 commissioners are present and we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Judy. Now I'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Probst, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm happy to do that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'll do my best on the New Mexico pledge as well. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Thank you very much, Mr. Props. That was perfect. All right, we'll have, our next item is consideration and approval of the agenda. Do any commissioners have any changes or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, I need a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Judy, could you please take the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
Approval of the agenda passes 5-0.
Thank you, Judy. All right. Next, we have item Roman numeral 4, a public hearing on case number 22-00001-TR-EN in the matter of the revocation of operating authorities for failure to comply with financial responsibility requirements. And this is a case. So Judy, what steps do we have to take to go into a public hearing?
You announced it, and staff will make their case, and then OGC will cross-examine. And then after the public hearing, we can go into the agenda matters. And then one of the agenda matters is an order on the public hearing.
Okay, so since I've announced it, we are now in the public hearing.
Yes, and
All right.
Hans
Well,
Mueller
let me read the full. Well,
from
who's,
our office will be participating for OGC in that matter.
thank you, Judy. Should I read this entire caption of the hearing then? I can do that. It's not a
Well,
problem.
normally, well, we've done it a variety of ways. Staff has read it or OGC has read it. You don't need to read it.
I don't mind. OGC can hear it. If you,
I'm happy to do that for you, Madam Chair.
okay, fine. Thank you, Hans.
No problem. The public hearing is in order in the matter of the revocation of operating authorities for failure to comply with financial responsibility requirements. This would be the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission Transportation Division versus 4B Services LLC, number 56809, Amarani's Trucking LLC, number 57724, Anybody Towing, number 57711, Armstrong Unlimited, number 57736, Aztec Services Inc., number 54401, Badlands Towing and Road Service LLC, number 55826, Battle Axe LLC, number 57948, Cervantes Trucking LLC, number 57870, Choctaw Services LLC, number 56499, Double Haul Delivery LLC, number 56689, Edifice Inc., number 57774, Esteban and Bro Trucking, number 54857, Garcia Trucking, number 57772, Generations Trucking LLC, number 57807, Genesis Trucking, number 57871, Glowworks Trucking LLC, number 54437, GRG Mobile Home Transport Inc., number 52633, Henderson Trucking LLC, number 56305, Home Care for the 21st Century, number 57776. iGroups Medical Transport, number 57390. Just Cruisin' LLC, number 57665. Kenny Avia Towing, number 57920. Lucero Trucking, number 55658. Lynn Matthews Trucking Inc., number 41353. M&M Towing Service, number 52658. Manuel Rojo Trucking, number 52449. Marlin Towing, number 57205. M. Davalos Trucking, LLC, number 57963. MEMA, LLC, number 57666. Mick H. Transport, LLC, number 57812. Milco Transport, LLC, number 57806. Morales and Son Trucking, number 55879. NEMT, number 57862. Outlaw Trucking, number 55161. RNS Trucking, LLC, number 57271. ROFIS Trucking, number 55028. RVS Trucking, number 55062. Ronix Towing, number 55210. Safe and Care Transport LLC, number 56230. Simply One Stop Towing LLC, number 57669. SOL Trucking LLC, number 57198. TMB Towing, number 56924. And Valley Grand Transport LLC, number 57320. And with that, I'll yield the floor to Elizabeth Jeffries and staff to present their case.
My name is Elizabeth Jeffries, and I'm representing the Transportation Division in this case. We've submitted Staff Exhibit 1 with an Attachment B, which presents a list of motor carriers that failed to provide the proof of financial responsibility, also known as a Form E, to the PRC as required under Section 65-2A-18 of the Motor Carrier Act. Each motor carrier received notices of non-compliance for this hearing and regarding the potential revocation of each carrier's authority by the Commission pursuant to Section 65-2A-27. And I'd like to call my witness, Kevin Bebe Horkes, and have her sworn in, please. Kevin, are you there? I wonder if she didn't get on. Let me send her the link again. Maybe that's her connecting. Kevin, is that you? Are you on mute?
Okay, can you see me?
I can see you.
Oh, yay, it worked. Okay, now let me fix myself here. Okay. All right, I think that's it. Yay.
Ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Ms. Jeffries,
Yes.
would you prefer I or the chair swear the witness in?
Oh, yes, please.
Ms. Bebe, can you raise your right hand, please?
Yes,
Do you testify that what the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge? Promise to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
yes.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bebe Horkes, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
by the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission Transportation Division and Business Operations Specialist O.
That's your title?
Yes,
Okay. As part of your duties in that position, did you review the notices and forms for each of the motor carriers at issue in this case?
yes,
Based upon that review, did you prepare or participate in preparing the testimony submitted as Exhibit 1 and the related attachments A and B regarding the issues concerning these motor carriers?
yes,
Do you have any changes or corrections to that testimony?
yes. Mick H Transport LLC, PRC number 57812, submitted a cancellation form yesterday afternoon and is now on the compliance list.
Okay.
Also, Manuel F. Garcia, doing business as M&M Towing Service, PRC number 52658, submitted proof of insurance, is now on the compliance list.
Okay, wonderful. If I ask you today the same questions as are set forth in the testimony contained as Exhibit 1, would your answers be the same?
Yes, with the exceptions of the cancellation and the proof of insurance.
Wonderful, okay. Are these answers true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes,
And would you adopt Exhibit 1 as your sworn testimony in this matter?
yes,
Given that you've done the two changes, with the two changes?
yes.
Okay. I would like to move for the admission of Exhibit 1 with attachments A and B into the record.
Any objections? Hearing no objections, the exhibit is moved on to the record.
And that's all we have. I don't know if anyone's entered appearances for any of the carriers.
Yeah, I have not received any requests to be present at this meeting, which let me ask Ms. Bay-Boyarquez a cross-exam question. Ms. Bay-Boyarquez, to the best of your knowledge, has any carrier that is currently on the non-compliant list requested to be part of this public hearing today to you?
No,
All right, thank you. No further questions. This witness can be dismissed.
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Any questions by commissioners? I'm sorry. Hearing none, the witness is dismissed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further witnesses, Ms. Jeffries?
That's all.
All right.
Excuse me, normally, we say, this concludes the public hearing portion of the agenda. And so the public hearing is concluded and we can go on now, Madam Chair, to the rest of the agenda.
Thank you very much, Judy. All right.
Before we conclude, which is why I was pausing,
Mhm.
I would like to know Office of General Counsel will make the alterations to the proposed order, which is currently on consent regarding Mick H Transport and M&M Towing to reflect the testimony provided during the during the public hearing today. So I would like the commissioners to note that the proposed order as is will be modified to account for the two transport carriers that are now in compliance. Further, that the notice regarding public hearing for today's public hearing, when it was sent out 1 month ago, did reflect a 9:30 start time for the public hearing. That being said, carriers were instructed to notify Transportation Division by yesterday. And as the testimony has provided, no transportation company requested to be present at the public hearing today or reached out for purposes of the link to join today's public hearing. So I would say that there is, I would state on the record that there is no objection to the change in time reflected from the initial order, from the initial notices that were sent out, so that it contains no defect.
Thank you very much, Hans. I would just like to inquire, what was the form of the notice out to the companies? How did we email them, or?
There were individual notices sent out to the full list, which is captured on the record on eDocket. Each company received its own individual notice.
By email or?
Which would probably be either emailed to their agent, or if no email was on file, that would have been sent to the address on file.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So this concludes the public hearing portion of our meeting agenda, and we'll move on to other items of the agenda now. Our next agenda item is item Roman numeral 5, introduction of special guests. Do we have any special guests today?
Madam Chair, I will defer to
I'm sorry, Judy.
there's an echo somewhere. I will defer to Hans
Okay.
as or not we have any public commenters signed up. But in terms of special guests, we have a presentation.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I do not have anyone that is indicated they have a special guest or wishes to make public comment. If there is nobody in the hearing room that has physically shown up today for public comment, we have neither special guest nor public comment today.
Okay, thank you very much, Hans. That takes care of item number 6 as well. Item number 7, we have consideration and approval of prior meeting minutes. These would be the minutes of October 5th, 2022 open meeting. Do any commissioners have any changes or to the minutes, the prior meeting minutes of October 5th? Hearing none, yes.
I will move the minutes of October 5th, 2022 into the record.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Byrd. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. So motion and a second. Judy, can you take the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, now we've come to Roman numeral 8, the discussion section, which has been moved forward. We have a presentation, which I think will be very interesting, presented by Margie Tatro of GridWorks, pertaining to advanced inverter technology, which I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to, because advanced inverter technology is a type of technology that's very important to many New Mexicans and will become even more important as we go forward. So thank you very much, Margie Tatro, for being here, and please proceed when you're ready.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. Let me check to see if you can see my screen that has the slide deck.
I can see it fine.
Great. Okay, I'm going to switch to the full screen so you can see as much as possible on this. All right, thank you. Again, I'm Margie Tatro, and I want to first express my appreciation. I'm a native New Mexican and lifelong resident, and I appreciate everything that the commission and the staff are doing to advance the modernization of our electric infrastructure. So a personal thanks from me as a New Mexican. I'm also privileged to be a part of the GridWorks team. And GridWorks is a nonprofit organization that really advances and works with organizations to try to advance clean energy agendas. But today I'd like to share with you some recommendations for the adoption of advanced inverters and distributed energy resources. And this work was conducted over the past about 9 months by a group that I'll describe more in detail in a moment. My hope this morning is to not only share the context for why this is important, but to tell you a little bit about the group and to share the recommendations with you. At the end, I've got some options, some ideas of actions that the Commission could consider taking regarding these recommendations. Now, let me say I'm impressed that the Commission is already incorporating some of the particular elements of this in your current rulemaking on interconnection, which I really appreciate your leadership in moving that forward. So I will describe the process and the context, and then I'll pause for questions that you might have about that before I launch into those recommendations. In the slide deck that you should also have available to you, there are additional slides I don't plan to share today. There's a specific slide on each recommendation in more detail. We can go to those if the conversation needs to, but I'd like to be available for conversation and to answer questions from anyone on the Commission for this discussion period. So does that plan sound like it's a path forward? All right, here we go then. First of all, advanced inverters are key to integrating distributed energy resources into the electric grid. Why are advanced inverters important? I use this little graphic here from a presentation by GridWorks over many years ago that show a lines person connecting solar or storage or conventional generation or electric cars or wind into the grid. And my comment is, if it were only this easy. It's not. This is a complicated and difficult endeavor. And there are not only electrical connections that need to be made appropriately between these resources and the grid, but there are also communications requirements so that these resources can interact with each other and that they can be visible and controlled and managed to optimize their performance on the grid. So our goal in adopting these advanced inverters is to make sure that electrical support can be offered by distributed energy resources, especially as we move toward higher penetration of these distributed resources onto the grid. Those would include things that I've mentioned: solar, storage, electrical vehicles, and others. And really what we're looking for is these resources to be able to support the grid with voltage and frequency support in a way that preserves safety and reliability and cybersecurity. Let me just point out that cybersecurity is one of the requirements as we move forward. It's not a showstopper, but it is one of the requirements that needs to be integrated. I know Commissioner Maestas has got some questions and interest in cybersecurity, and I'm really glad that is on your minds because it is an important requirement. And so the communication between the grid and these resources is something that is just as important as the electrical interaction between these resources. So today's objective, I want to describe the recommendations. I'm sorry, let me go back. Trying to move these pictures around. Discuss the recommendations of the Advanced Inverter Working Group. And this group was made up by folks that I'll give you a list in a moment, but it was really the members of the working group from industry and utilities and other entities that created the content of these recommendations. The topics were discussed, presented, proposals were made. There was a conversation about these. So the content of the recommendations came from the working group, and GridWorks was honored to be the facilitator of these conversations. And that's what those two pieces coming together created the recommendations you will see. I want to be able to answer any questions you all have about the recommendations. But first, let me give a little more context and introduce the working group itself. Here is the working group. And the Advanced Inverter Working Group was 55 individuals from 25 different organizations. They were representatives from the electric power system operators, or the independently owned, the investor-owned utilities, El Paso Electric, PNM, and SPS Excel. Plus, we had quite a diverse range of industry members participating in this, ranging from renewable energy equipment manufacturers to developers to organizations that just make inverters. And we had very strong participation by those equipment manufacturers because they're the ones who are making sure that this new equipment, these new advanced inverters, can satisfy the needs of those who are going to use them. So you can see the list of industry members. We also had some very valuable contribution from other organizations that you can see in the right-hand column. I want to call out a special thank you to the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, who provided some very important contributions about how these advanced inverters are being incorporated into grids around the country. Also, the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, who works on the adoption of these new technologies across the US, were very helpful. Of course, the PRC and the Office of Attorney General from the state were involved. And then two other organizations that were indispensable were Sandia National Laboratories. Mr. Michael Ropp has been part of our technical advisory group and participating in all the meetings. And he is a person who actually helped create and develop the new industry standards on these inverters. So we were very fortunate to have him. And the SunSpec Alliance, which is a group that promotes and evolves standards for this kind of interaction of new technology. So this Advanced Inverter Working Group, which I had the privilege to facilitate and worked very closely with Arthur O'Donnell on loan from the Department of Energy to the Commission. We facilitated these meetings. There were 12 of them in between February and September of 2022, so this year. The group produced a report and is very excited that some of the content is being considered by the Commission under some current conversations. So that's who the group consisted of. Let me say that there was one group that was not part of this. There was no exclusion requirement. Anybody who wanted to participate in this working group was invited. You noticed on the first column, though, we were missing any representation from the New Mexico electric cooperatives. And they are important in this conversation. They are advancing the adoption of this new technology. And so I hope in the future that they can be involved in this. I will, at the end of this presentation, show you a document that is published by the National Rural Electrical Cooperative Association that has some very useful tips and guidelines, and actually our recommendations are consistent with those. So we feel like they're represented kind of in aggregate, but we didn't have any specific cooperatives as part of the working group. We also did not ask all the participants to take a formal vote about whether they supported the recommendations that are in the document or not. We used a general sense of consensus from the group, and we did ask at the end of the process for quotes and comments about the general support of the recommendations. And I must say that we were very pleased that there was general support for the recommendations. There were a few issues that still need to be worked out, and those are noted in the formal report itself. So why is this important? Why is the working group so excited about this? And why were these individuals willing to donate their time to advance this conversation? And I'll point out here that we are in New Mexico on a journey. We're on a journey of enabling the distributed energy resources to be model citizens in New Mexico's modern electricity infrastructure. You all are creating the foundation. You started this foundation through 2 cases that are mentioned here in reforming interconnection rules and manuals in the state. Those 2 cases, 20-00171 UT and 21-00266 UT, really created the basis for conversations about reforming interconnection. And at that time in 2021, there was an interconnection working group established. We call that phase 1 of the interconnection working group. And that group spent over a year to produce a report that described processes that are important for interconnection, like screening of interconnection applications and dispute resolution processes and all kinds of things that are important as we think about greater interconnection of these resources to the grid. There were technical issues raised regarding things like how do you incorporate and deal with stored power as it exports to the grid, and how do you make sure that safety and reliability are preserved in those cases. There was also discussion during phase 1 about cost recovery options of when or if distribution system upgrades are needed, how are those paid for in the future? And so some options were described in that report. Then there were some critical topics in 2022 that were clear that they needed to be addressed in more detail. And that's why phase 2 of the interconnection working group went forward. And that's what created this advanced inverter working group, because that group really wanted to talk about the new industry standards for interconnection of distributed resources to the grid and try to put forward some suggestions about how New Mexico incorporate that new standard, because it's not a simple standard. It's not as easy as that first graphic that I showed you, where the lines person is just plugging those resources into the power pole or into the distribution lines. It's not that simple. It's fairly complicated. And this group was willing to put their energy toward figuring out how to make this happen in New Mexico. I do believe there are future topics that still need to be addressed. In fact, in our recommendations, you will see a 3 to 4 year recommendation of evolving our learning and evolving our operating experience about interconnecting these resources in great numbers into the grid. And again, those interconnections are both electrical and their communications. And so that's complicated, it's evolving. There are issues that still need to be worked out. And that's why I show this slide set as this journey that we're on to advance these resources and the modernization of our grid. So I'm going to show one more context slide, and then I want to stop and see if there are questions about the context. So you may wonder why people are talking about IEEE standard 1547-2018. This is the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers standard. These are standards that are put together by industry in a consensus basis, and they take quite a bit of time to put together standards. This standard, which is the most current one related to this topic, this 2018 version, deals with interconnecting and interoperating distributed resources with the power system. And let me just show you here the difference between the previous standard, which was published in 2003, and the current standard, which is the 2018 standard, which is the one that really is governing this advanced inverter technology adoption at this point. The 2003 standard really was built around a very limited understanding and a limited amount of distributed energy resource penetration into the grid. It was a single set of requirements for all these resources, regardless of whether they were rotating equipment or inverter based. And the primary purpose of that standard was to ensure that the distributed energy resources did not interfere with the normal operation of the distribution system. So that's an important note. It was, don't interfere, don't get in the way, don't be a problem, don't create issues. Now, in contrast, the 2018 standard, which is built around a growing penetration of distributed resources, it has a menu of options for incorporating these technologies. And the primary purpose evolved from being, don't just avoid interference, but be positioned to support the dynamic and transient stability of the grid. So what that means is, let's get these resources on the system that can support grid operations, can support voltage stability and frequency stability, and serve as this model citizen and supporter of the grid, as opposed to being just don't get in the way kind of a thing. So it's a very important difference. The 2018 standard is really intended, again, to allow these distributed resources to have automatic responses to problems and try to support and correct problems that may be occurring on the grid, and particularly on voltage and frequency support. And it also, the new standard is enabling better communication between the grid and these distributed energy resources. A comment today, most of these resources, if it's a solar plant on your home or it's a potential community solar project, there is currently no good way for the utility to see what's happening with that resource. There's, unless the system is very big, larger than 1 megawatt, then there's some SCADA or some controls. But these smaller systems, there is no good visibility and no real communication between the technologies and the grid to optimizing that performance. So the communication is just as important as the electrical interaction. And let me stop here, because now I want to go into the recommendations, but I'd like to stop sharing for a moment and ask if there are any questions or context not clear, or because I'd like to help in any way. And I also see that my colleague, Matthew Tisdale, the Executive Director for GridWorks, has joined us, as well as Michael Ropp from Sandia National Laboratories also has joined us. So welcome to my two colleagues. And let me ask if there are questions from the Commission about what I've presented before I go to the recommendations themselves.
Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Tatro? I would just like to point out what she's already pointed out, that this was a tremendous amount of work by these parties, and the thing that's exciting is that these inverters have a totally different function than was formally engaged, wherein these inverters permit the two-way communication between rooftop systems and the larger grid. They're such a marvelous enabling tool. I hesitate to start asking you questions, Margie. I don't know if we get that done today, but I'll try to use some restraint here and maybe let you go forward. But I'm really excited about this rulemaking. I'm excited about this new technology, and it's not so new, but I'm excited about the deployment of it in New Mexico. And so please proceed. Unless does anybody have any questions? You understand everything so far? Okay, let's go on.
Great. Okay, thanks. I will continue here with the recommendations themselves then. And let me get back here. So there were 6 recommendations in and they are available in the report. The first recommendation really was to be clear with some policy guidance regarding some functions of these advanced inverters. And then also to then set aside any of the technical details that need to be specific to the operation. Those could be described and documented in the utilities documents. These are called technical interconnection and interoperability requirements documents, or TIIR documents. But we thought it was important to separate some policy guidance from the specifics that would be appropriate for each utility. And so that was the first recommendation, a few issues to set some guidance on, things like how are these inverters supposed to operate under normal and abnormal conditions, for example, is one of the policy guidance decisions. And so there are others of those, but the first thing was to notice that there are separate levels of detail required, and not all of the technical details may be appropriate for rules, but they should be documented somewhere and available to the public so that they can see what the requirements are. Transparency.
Margie, excuse me, I have a question about that.
Yeah, sure.
Can you distinguish the technical interconnection and interoperability requirements documents from the former manual that we had that was problematic for our agency because it contained material that we felt really needed to be in the rule? Tell me about these technical there's a broader standard, right? That those all follow. Is that correct?
There are some guidelines. The Electric Power Research Institute has published some guidelines on what should go into this TIIR document. And there's some encouragement that those elements be included in every utility provider's set of TIIRs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some of the material that was previously in the New Mexico manual really does belong in the TIIRs instead, because they have to evolve, they may change, they may be utility specific. And so maybe it makes sense that the TIIRs would replace what was previously a manual. I don't know, that's a conversation for you all, but we think that this terminology and the elements that are listed by EPRI of what should go into those are a more current or more modern model for how those documents be created.
Okay. But what I understand, though, is it sounds like it's a utility-specific operating manual.
That's correct. It is utility-specific.
Okay. So
Yeah.
maybe that's different from, I can see it as a different thing than the manual we created, which was supposed to apply to all the utilities.
Yeah, you know,
It's more of an internal document.
Sure. Yeah, no, sure. I mean, the commission could say that each of these documents needs to have these elements, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that could be in a rule or something, but
Mm-hmm.
then the details be put together and maybe they're subject to review by the commission staff, maybe they're need to be published, those kinds of things. And the Advanced Inverter Working Group did not spend a lot of time figuring out what processes should apply to those TIR document reviews and approvals. So that's work that still could be done.
Thank you.
Sure. Recommendation number 2 really was just to say that this new set of recommendations should apply to facilities that are up to and including 10 megawatts. That's consistent with the existing rules, and there's an affirmation and a recommendation about what kind of testing and certification requirements should be applied to these new inverters so that there's assurance that they meet the requirements when a new system is commissioned. Recommendation number 3 really pertains to at what location in the electric system do you apply the standard? Because there are lots of different models now about how distributed resources interact with the grid. There may be one system in one location that interconnects directly with the grid, and that it's pretty straightforward about where this standard should apply. But in other cases, there may be multiple distributed energy resources, like multiple photovoltaic systems that are ganged together, and then they are the ones that interact as a collection to the grid. So this notion of where you apply the standard and how that's documented in an interconnection agreement is something that's important given this higher penetration of these resources onto the grid. So we recommend in the Advanced Inverter Working Group that that reference point of applicability be adopted based on the IEEE standard, and that that location be documented in each interconnection agreement. Recommendation 4, which is important, is to define what is normal and what is abnormal for performance categories, because once you determine that set of requirements, then the specific settings of inverter will follow from those decisions. And I was very pleased to see in the September version of the interconnection rule that the commission is defining and setting the expectation for normal and abnormal performance. So that's a great step forward. Now, following that, though, there are specific functions or knobs or tweaks or settings that have to be defined when a system is commissioned or put in place. And then at some point, there may have to be some adjustments to those knobs or tweaks or functions. And so what the process is going to be for allowing changes to those, such that both the utility and the distributed energy resource owner understand what's expected, is going to be an important thing that has not been articulated anywhere and is work to be done. You can see some details in the report that suggest some ways of moving forward and defining those processes for allowing changes to the settings. So let me describe.
Margie, can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
So how does this, how do these definitions of normal and abnormal performance categories then get formulated in the future by the continuing work of the committee, or what?
Well, if the rule that you're currently discussing and debating and acting on includes those definitions, there's nothing that has to be done in the future. Those stick, that just say this is the expectation in New Mexico of how equipment should behave. And it tells the equipment manufacturers and the DER owners that there's a certain set of functions and settings that go along with those categories that are to be implemented. So it kind of gives a roadmap or direction or a sense of here's where you need to go interpret and apply the standard to meet those categories. And those categories, Michael Ropp, you can correct me here if I'm misspeaking, but those categories are not things that would change going forward, even though some of the specific knobs or functions or settings might adjust. So Michael, did you want to add to this?
Margie, I think you said it very well, that for each one of these functions, there's a range of adjustability for some of these parameter values. And we may choose to slide things around within that range of adjustability, but the functions don't change, and the categories, just like Margie said, they don't change over time.
Okay. Thank you, Michael, very much.
Great, but no, good question. It's a complicated standard. I forget how many tens of pages it is, but there's a lot of detail in it. And let me just describe in general that these new inverters can be set up with autonomous functions. So it comes to the field, it's got a certain set of autonomous functions that allow that system to be a good citizen on the grid. And in some cases, that's what's called the default activation functions. We think over time, there will be operational learning that may tweak those settings so that these resources provide more voltage and frequency support as the system evolves or as more distributed energy resources come into the grid. So this is something, it's like, fine tuning that engine after you take it to a high elevation location or something like that. There's evolution that will occur and fine tuning this as we go forward. So the other two recommendations here are recommendation 5 is to require the communications protocols that are outlined in the industry standard to be used in New Mexico. There are 3 standards for communication. And by that, I mean, that's the language that's going to be spoken between the inverter and the grid. The software and the exchange of information. It's like, what language are they going to speak to interact with each other? And there are pros and cons of adopting any of those 3 protocols that are defined in the standard. So the recommendation from the working group was to allow any of those 3 to be used, and at the same time begin a 3-phased approach over the next 4 to 5 years to be able to fine tune that communications interoperability so that there is full transparency between the distributed energy resource and the grid, and there is a way to optimize the performance so that the 2 are harmonizing their operation. That is not an easy thing to do. It's not going to happen overnight. I mean, we're not in a position like you are with laptops where everybody's USB port and everybody's cell phone kind of interacts with every other. We're not there yet, and we need to give some time for the communications infrastructure, particularly of the utilities and of the industry, to evolve, and we need some experience with that. And that's why a 3-phased approach is recommended from the working group.
Can I ask a question about that, Margie, as well?
Yeah.
So you say there are 3 different kind of languages that can be used to communicate between the distributed resource and the grid. But yet, you invoke the idea that everybody's got the same size USB port. Why is it evolved that there are 3 languages when maybe one would be a simpler way of operating? Are there benefits to the different languages for systems that they're working with, for example?
Yeah, no, really good question. And there are pros and cons of these different languages to be used and these different protocols. Some are more simple to integrate into the technology. Some have greater detailed layers in them. Some have, there's debate, but some believe that one protocol has a greater degree of security built into it, a security layer that's applicable. Some are more compatible with existing supervisory control and data acquisition systems that are currently deployed by the utilities. The reason is that there's not one best answer. And so that's why the working group evolved to pick say allow those 3 protocols, but let's learn from them. And it could be after some pilot programs or a year or two of experience, the group of utilities and equipment manufacturers say, oh, this is the best one. We got to go with that in the future. But we're not there today. That's the problem.
I see. I understand.
Okay. Yeah.
It's really an evolving situation.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it'll take years.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And
Thank
so
you.
really, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said thank you.
Sure. And so the last recommendation is to form a technical working group to continue the evolution and learning and the implementation of these details. There are technical details on the electrical side and on the communication side that need to evolve. And we recommend some forum for keeping such a group alive. And there were many members of the working group who expressed an interest and ability to be part of that, because there is learning that takes place between the utilities and between the utilities and equipment manufacturers. And currently in the state, we don't have another mechanism for that shared learning to occur. And this group could also be a great resource to the PRC.
Mm-hmm. So just to be clear, you're talking about a technical working group that will continue to operate for the indefinite future while we go through this interconnection transformation, really.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And it'll be an arm of the commission.
I don't know how you operationalize that. I'm not sure, but the need for it is definitely there.
Mm-hmm. I understand. Thank you.
So in summary, yeah, those are the recommendations. I just point out that this new standard is complex. There's policy guidance required, which you already recognize because you are considering that in your current rulemakings. Of the electrical interconnection parameters are a set. They must be considered as a set, and they must be integrated with a communications interoperability set. And so we're on this journey with you. We're glad to be of help. And here are our thoughts about some next steps that the commission could take. Let me just be clear on this, that these are the GridWorks suggestions. These weren't necessarily word for word created by the Advanced Inverter Working Group, but we believe they speak for the intent of the group. And the first step would be to make the Advanced Inverter Working Group report available, perhaps through the docket system. The phase 1 report also maybe should be available to people. Second option is to enact some recommendations that aren't in the current interconnection rule, but might be advised by our recommendations. And we'd be happy to have further discussion offline with you all or with staff about that. And then finally, this last one is about opening some sort of either docket or something else to establish a technical working group to evolve and improve our interconnection practices as we go down this, continue our journey here in transforming our electric grid. And we just put some topics here that we know a working group would be welcome to address. So let me just end by referencing 2 other resources that are, the first one I highly recommend if you're interested in this topic from a policy perspective. Making the Grid Smarter by the Interstate Renewable Energy Council is a very good document. It starts from a policy perspective, and then it dives down to a few technical issues, just enough to either whet your appetite or put you to sleep. But it's a great document to put it all together. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association also has a guide on adopting this new standard for cooperatives. So I know I've maybe taken too much of your time this morning, but I'd want to end with the possibility that Matthew and I are here to help. GridWorks is here to help if you go forward. And let me just stop sharing and ask if you have questions or want to go into any other additional detail.
Commissioners, anybody have any questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, really just a comment. Thank you, Margie, for that sort of bottom-up explanation. I think it's good for an audience that's not technically oriented, and this is a huge technical task going forward, obviously. And I just wanted to thank GridWorks in terms of directionally, both in the report that you submitted a little while back and in this work, for just keeping us focused on the big picture and giving some clarity to what the important tasks are going forward. So I just wanted to thank you for your efforts and the clarity of what you present to us.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Matthew, did you want to add anything?
Oh, no, only if we're in saying thank you mode instead of question mode. I'll add my thanks to Margie Tatro, who's been a wonderful addition to the GridWorks family, leading this working group, and I think has done an amazing job with the work in this presentation. So thank you, Margie, for all of that, and all the credit for all this progress really is due to Margie's hard work, and we really appreciate that.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
One other comment is, Margie, couldn't you just make it simpler?
Commissioner Fishman, I guess I need to remark on that. I was about to remark anyhow about what this working group talks about. I actually sat in on a number of their meetings, and it's very complex, high-level stuff. I understood some of it, and then I pretty much had to, ask dumb questions and got patient answers. But this is really important work that this group is doing. And, they're very smart and numerous, very smart, technical-minded folks who are devoting free time to helping us work out all these kinks and questions and barriers and issues that exist right now before New Mexico, through our rules, can get the right regulatory underpinning to carry out the building of the foundation for the grid of the future. I mean, this is free work, high level work, persistent, devoted people working on this. It's really marvelous. And I didn't know government could operate this way with help from the community at such a high quality level. And I can't tell you how it's kind of inspiring. And I feel very, very grateful to these people. This is very complex stuff they're talking about, and they're trying to solve problems that our agency won't have to even try to attempt to do on our own. So I can't thank everybody involved enough. Michael Ropp, he's a busy Sandia Labs high-level scientist, gives free time. And, there are many, many people on that committee who are also devoting time away from their careers to help us. So, and GridWorks, made it happen so smoothly. Margie was running all those meetings and guiding them along their agreements and disagreements. It was really very impressive to observe. And we're very, well, I don't know the word. It's a very good thing that we were able to enjoy these benefits from the community. So I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you very much for what help you've provided us so far. And I think you'll probably still be willing to do in the future. I hope. So any more thoughts from anybody?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Hans.
Yes, I just want to make a quick disclaimer for everyone listening at home. The suggestions proposed and recommendations proposed by GoodWorks today, I just want to say the caveat here is regarding the current interconnection rulemaking, which is 21-266 UT. The last order of the commission on September 20th, 2022, which reopened the commentary period, did close the record on October 24th. So to the extent that the presentation today asks for us to put recommendations into that current rulemaking, I consider the presentation today to be outside of the comment window. However, obviously what Margie has presented some excellent ideas for fine tuning the interconnection rule in the future, and Office of General Counsel will be happy to open that requested docket of Margie so that we can continually fine tune the interconnection rule once we have it in place, hopefully next month. And the recommendations made today will help us to continually sharpen the saw once we have it in place. But for purposes of the presentation today, I will not be adding any of the recommendations into the 21-266 UT. I just think we needed to state that for the record, just in case any party, would have a proposed objection. I do not consider the presentation part of that record today.
Thank you very much, Hans. That's a very important clarification. I appreciate it. And it's good to know that it's possible to do it in the future. So thank you very much. Great. All right. Well, again, thanks, GridWorks. We look forward to hearing from you more in the future. Let's move on to the next part of our agenda, which is the consent agenda. Hans, if you could read the captions of the consent action items, I'd appreciate it.
Can I just say IBID for the first one?
Sure.
Hold on, let me just pull it up in front of me.
Yeah, I can do that for the record. I agree with Hans that he has already read the caption for this case, and I'm trying to expand this so that
I've got it, Judy. I'll
Okay.
read it onto the record. Consent action items read as follows: Transportation Matters 22-0001 TREN in the matter of the revocation of operating authorities for failure to comply with financial responsibility requirements. And that is a potential order regarding revocation of operating authorities for lack of financial responsibility. Utility Matters 22-00257 UT in the matter of the application for reliability determination for the SunZia transmission project, New Mexico Renewable Energy Transmission Authority applicant, potential initial order. 22-00076 UT in the matter of the filing of the 2022 annual reports and related FCC filings by eligible telecommunications carriers. That is a potential order recertifying eligible telecommunications carriers for federal universal service fund support. 22-00093 UT in the matter of the application for approval of El Paso Electric Company's 2022 Renewable Energy Act plan pursuant to the Renewable Energy Act and 17.9.572 NMAC. And 6th, revised rate number 38 RPS cost rider. That is a potential order suspending the advice notice and extending time for consideration of application. 21-00281 UT in the matter of the joint application for location approval of the expanded Corona Wind Project and the revised Corona Gentai system and for right-of-way width approval pursuant to the Public Utility Act, NMSA 1978, sections 62-9-3 and 62-9-3.2. That is a potential order reopening the record to amend the final order and order to reclose. And finally, 22-00166 UT in the matter of the application of Public Service Company of New Mexico for continued use of its fuel and purchased power cost adjustment clause. Public Service Company of New Mexico applicant, that is the potential order appointing hearing examiner.
Thank you very much, Hans. So we'll move on then to, oh, well, let's see. Do we have any, do any commissioners have any requests about or any comments about anything on the consent agenda? If not, I need a motion to approve that agenda.
Move to approve.
Okay, Commissioner Maestas.
Second.
All right, Commissioner Fishman, thank you. Got a motion and a second. Can we have the roll call on that, please?
Yes. Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
The consent agenda items pass 5-0.
Thank you, Judy. Moving on then to Roman numeral 10, regular action items. Under A, we have no transportation matters. Under B, in utility matters, we have several cases. The first one is 22-00161 UT. In the matter of the joint application of Atrisco Solar LLC and Atrisco Energy Storage LLC for location approval of the Atrisco Solar and Storage facilities and associated transmission facilities in Bernalillo County, New Mexico, pursuant to New Mexico statutes annotated 62-9-3 and right-of-way width determination pursuant to New Mexico statute annotated 62-9-3.2. Judith Amer will present a potential final order on the recommended decision. So, Ms. Amer, let's proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the commission. This matter comes before you on the June 15th, 2022 application for location approval filed by Atrisco Solar LLC and Atrisco Storage LLC, referred to collectively as Atrisco. The recommended decision issued on October 5th, 2022, and upon the exceptions filed by Atrisco on October 10th, 2022. This matter was on the agenda as an executive session in accordance with last week, in accordance with the Open Meetings Act 10-15-1H3, deliberations by a public body in connection with an administrative adjudicatory proceeding. The only matter that was discussed in that executive session was the recommended decision. Briefly, the background to this case, I will go through the background and what the recommended decision found because none of this previously has been discussed at an open meeting. So on June 15th, 2022, the application was filed for approval to locate 400 megawatts of solar energy and 200 megawatts of energy storage, and to locate an approximately 100 to 800 foot 345 kV generation tie transmission line and associated substation, Atrisco substation, the transmission facilities. in order to connect the solar and storage facilities to PNM's electric transmission system at PNM's new switchyard. And I will now go to what the recommended decision found. That the commission has jurisdiction over the parties and the subject matter, that reasonable, proper, and adequate notice of this proceeding was given, that Atrisco's location approval is unopposed. There are no interveners, no protests. Staff supports the application. Further found that a hearing in the case was not required, thus was vacated. This was done as Atrisco requested expedited treatment of this location approval case. Swift adjudication of the application ensures that the Atrisco generation and storage facilities are operation by the proposed operation date, which will in turn ensure PNM has adequate resources for its renewable portfolio standard purposes and adequate capacity for future summer peaks. Further, found that the parties agree that the pre-filed testimony was evidence in the hearing, that Atrisco has provided all the required information for location approval under the location statute and location rule, that Atrisco's application satisfies the requisite legal and regulatory standards for location statute and location rule, that the application satisfies the requisite legal and regulatory standards for the location statute, location rule for the Gentie line and substation, that the proposed 140-foot right-of-way complies with electrical and safety codes. The parties include the sole landowner of the lands upon which the Atrisco facilities will be built, agreed to the right-of-way with. Commission approval under the location statute is not required for energy storage facilities at issue here. And in any case, location approval should be given for energy storage facilities, as they will be placed in the same area studied in the varying environmental and cultural resource reports filed by the witnesses in this case. That supplemental testimony establishes that the increase in the size of the storage component of the project may result in portions of the switchyard being outside the 36.6 acre study area. And if at any time Atrisco learns that this development will have any negative environmental impacts, it will inform the commission at the earliest date. There's no evidence that this will happen, and this provision is suggested given the recent amendment and change to the project. So now I will go on to the decretal paragraphs, which approves the application, and then I will just read the fact that beginning 90 days after the date the commission issues a final order granting approval for the projects here, Atrisco shall file quarterly compliance reports with the commission that report the following. 1, progress made with respect to any phase of the project and the applicable terms and conditions included in the order. 2, any deviations from the terms and conditions, reason for the deviation, and alternative measures implemented. And 3, notice of the date the project becomes operational. And then there are 2 other decretal paragraphs, decretal paragraph H and decretal paragraph I, which Atrisco accepted to, so I will read those. H states, if at any time Atrisco learns that the increase in the size of the storage facilities will have negative environmental impacts, it will inform the commission of this at the earliest possible date. and J, Atrisco will coordinate with PNM to ensure that PNM makes a filing under 17.5.440 NMAC regarding the switchyard once technical details are finalized. So now I will move on to Atrisco's exceptions regarding paragraphs H and paragraphs J, as I just stated. Regarding the exception number 1 to paragraph 8, Atrisco argued that it's not clear what is meant by the term, quote, negative environmental impacts, close quote, which is in decretal paragraph H, because Atrisco states neither the location statute, NMSA 1978 section 6293, nor the location rule 17.9.592 NMAC use or define that term. Rather, the location statute 6293F applies the standard, quote, undue impairment of important environmental values, close quote. And that standard applies only to transmission facilities. According to Atrisco, energy storage facilities are not transmission facilities. Therefore, the location statute does not confer authority for the commission to impose the proposed conditions stated in decretal paragraph H with respect to energy storage facilities. Moreover, according to Atrisco, even if it did, it's not clear what is meant by negative environmental impacts, because Atrisco maintains that energy storage will result in net environmental benefits. Atrisco argues that the evidence demonstrates that the transmission facilities, i.e. the Gentie line and the substation, over which the commission does have authority pursuant to the location statute, will be located within the 36.6 acre analysis area, regardless of the expansion of the energy storage facilities. For this reason, Atrisco asserts that the transmission facility will not unduly impair important environmental values. In addition, Atrisco points to the protection measures which Atrisco committed to, and Atrisco states that these measures provide substantial protection against environmental harm, as well as the quarterly compliance filing that will provide timely updates to the commission as construction proceeds. So I'll stop here and state that the proposed order would concur with this exception and would delete the paragraph H. But now I will go on to Atrisco exception number 2, which is an exception to the decretal paragraph J. And that, just to refresh your memory, was that Atrisco will coordinate with PNM to ensure that PNM will make a filing under 17.5.440 NMAC regarding the switchyard once technical details are finalized. Atrisco requested the commission delete this provision. The basis for its exception is that Atrisco states that Rule 440 applies to public utilities, and Atrisco is not a public utility. Therefore, neither the location statute nor Rule 440 provide the commission authority to order an entity that is not a public utility, such as Atrisco, to comply with Rule 440. Further, Atrisco cannot be compelled to ensure that a public utility such as PNM complies with Rule 440. Atrisco states it has no means to ensure that PNM will make its required 440 filing. Thus, according to Atrisco, it could not comply with Decretal Paragraph J. And Atrisco asserts that this provision is unnecessary because PNM's Director of Transmission and Substation Engineering, Lori Williams, testified in her self-affirmed testimony that was attached to the direct testimony of Eric Desmarais that PNM would make its required 440 filing regarding the PNM switchyard. According to Atrisco, in the event the commission has concerns with the timing, substance, or filing of by PNM of its Rule 440 filing, its recourse is with PNM. And similarly, the proposed order would concur with Atrisco's exception and would delete paragraph J. So the proposed order accepts Atrisco's exceptions and adopts the findings of fact and conclusions of law and decretal paragraphs contained in the RD in its entirety, with the deletion of decretal paragraph H and J. And I stand for questions.
Commissioners, does anybody have any comments or questions?
Madam Chair, I would like to move the order.
Okay, I have a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay. I just wanted to discuss these exceptions a little bit, Judy, just to understand. I mean, I understand PNM is not a party to this case. It would be nice to have this information, and I appreciate the reasons for concurring with the exceptions. I just wonder if there's any other mechanism by which we could have it, have some sort of a reporting about any impact associated with the storage facilities because they're anticipated to expand, correct?
Yes, they are anticipated to expand, but it's undetermined right now how
Okay.
much and exactly where. That being said, Rule 440 is a rule that applies to public utilities, and they are required under Rule 40, which is recently amended, but they are required in this case to make a Rule 440 filing. And I think what Atrisco was objecting to is the requirement that Atrisco will ensure that they make it. And Atrisco has no power to ensure that. PNM has testified that they will make it. And of course, if any utility does not comply with Rule 440, the commission has its powers to compel compliance at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And no, I agree with Atrisco's reasoning that they can't make the. I thought that was aspirational language, but I can see their reading of it as well. So, all right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from any other discussion from the commissioners before we vote? Hearing none. Judy, can you take the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
The motion approving The proposed order passes 5-0.
Okay,
Madam
thank you.
Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Christopher, the hearing examiner, for the terrific work he did on this docket in a very expedited mode, sped up mode. So the commission really appreciates his efforts and the great work he did.
I completely agree, Commissioner Fishman. I'm glad you pointed that out. This was a very high quality, speedy job. So it's always wonderful to have our staff step up this way. So moving on, we'll go to the next regular action item, and that is action item number 9. The case number is 21-00128-UT in the matter of a commission rulemaking regarding New Mexico Public Regulation Commission Rule 17.7.3, New Mexico Annotated Code, or Administrative Code, sorry, integrated resource plans and procurement procedures. Judith Amer is going to present a potential order on motions for rehearing and motion to reopen the record. So Judy, you have the floor again.
Yes, this is a lot of matters that I'm involved in. This matter in particular comes before you upon the October 14th filings by Public Service Company of New Mexico, El Paso Electric, and upon the October 17th filing by Southwestern Public Service Company of their motions for a hearing, and upon an October 14th, 2022 filing by EPE of a motion to reopen the record and present new evidence. And upon an order setting response schedule that the commission entered last week on October 19th, and upon the responses filed on October 24th, 2022. At the outset, I just want to state the statutory provision that applies to motions for rehearing. It is in the Public Utility Act. It's section 621016. And it states, after an order or decision has been made by the commission, any party to the proceedings may, within 30 days after entry of the order or decision, apply for a rehearing in respect of any matters determined in said proceedings and specified in the application for rehearing. And the commission may grant and hold such rehearing on said matters. The commission shall either grant or refuse an application for rehearing within 20 days after the application therefore is filed in the office of the commission. And a failure by the commission to act upon such application within that period shall be deemed a refusal thereof. If the application be granted, the commission's order shall be deemed vacated, and the commission shall enter a new order after the rehearing shall have been concluded. This particular statute, given the fact that the 20-day time period would be on November 3rd. So procedurally, the commission could grant rehearing today, and that would fulfill the time period. In addition, if the commission decided not to act at all today, the commission still has next week to either grant or deny, or if the commission fails to act by November 3rd, that will be deemed a refusal. So I'm just trying to explain the process. The commission, if it does grant or partially grant rehearing, it does not need to actually hold a public hearing. It can open up the process and base it upon the record as it exists now, including the motions for rehearing and the responses. So I hope everyone understands that process, and I'll try to, as briefly as possible, but I don't know how brief it's going to be unless the commissioners do not want me to go through all three of the utilities grounds for motions for rehearing. There is a substantial overlap. And when I get to a place of overlap, I won't bother to repeat it. That being said, P&M's motion for rehearing has the following, as they term it, areas of concern with the rule. First, they believe that the new provisions on procurement and the independent monitor are overbroad, improperly limit utility discretion, add time, resource, and costs to the IRP process without any assurance that the process will result in more effective resource acquisition proceedings. Even though the rule says that the commission is only going to review the utilities bid evaluation, P&M claims this review implies the commission shall make a substantive assessment of the utilities a decision, which is inconsistent with the role stated in the order. Regarding this facilitated stakeholder process, P&M claims 6 months is insufficient time to complete the steps outlined. So they would like to either allow more flexibility or extend that period. Third, they claim that the requirement in the facilitated stakeholder process of requiring utilities to provide up to 5 modeling runs per requesting party should be revised or stricken because the NOPRD rule did not specify 5 modeling runs. It only stated that staff, that the utility would provide, quote, reasonable access to the same modeling software used by the utility on equal footing as the utility in accordance with commission precedent, and the utility shall share all modeling information, close quote. P&M said that providing this number of modeling runs would be impossible within the mandated 6 months. And P&M claims that part of this rule would allow staff to provide an analysis based on alternative open source modeling software. And P&M and none of the other commenters had the opportunity to assess this provision because it wasn't part of the NOPR rule. Fourth, P&M claims the rule's variance provisions are an inadequate substitute for express exemptions. P&M requests that all of the variance provisions be changed to exemptions. Especially P&M is concerned about emergency procurements being defined as too narrow and being a variance and not an exemption. EPE's motion for rehearing has some of the similar claims that P&M's does. EPE claims that it would prescribe all of the utilities resource acquisitions and dictate factors the utility must consider when evaluating resources, and require that all resources be procured through competitive solicitation despite the variance provisions, and does not want to have an independent monitor oversee resource acquisitions, and does not want the independent monitors shielded from discovery or examination. EPE has its own particular objection that PNM did not have regarding its effect on multi-jurisdictional utilities such as EPE and SPS. EPE questions whether the IRP rule could be applied in a way that would allow EPE to continue to plan and procure for its entire system. In particular, EPE argues that it will make that EPE will be forced to transition away from least cost planning and transmission. EPE will be required to transition away from least cost planning and resource acquisitions for its New Mexico and Texas jurisdictions, given that Texas comprises 80% of EPE's system. And they spend a lot of time in the motion for rehearing discussing the fact that they will have to do separate procurements for New Mexico in order to comply with the IRP rule and the Renewable Energy Act rule. And EPE states that their expert, Mr. Hawkins, estimates that the incremental cost to New Mexico retail customers resulting from separate system planning and resource acquisition could be as much as $74 million per year in 2040. Moving on, EPE also had the same exception that SPS had regarding variances versus exemptions. In particular, EPE asserts that emergency procurements and capacity and or energy generation from capacity and or energy from generation facilities of other utilities or from non-utility generators pursuant to 2-year term or less, or 20 megawatts or less, should be exempted and not part of the variance process. Moving on, EPE has the same objection regarding the 5 modeling runs as PNM did. SPS's motion for rehearing was filed not on October 14th, but was filed on October 17th. Apparently, SPS thought that the date of the final order was October 15th because an errata was filed that date, which attached exhibits, including the 3 exhibits that showed the current rule, the NOPRD rule, and the final rule. That errata was filed on October 15th. So the reason I'm stating this is because Onward commented on this later, and I'm going to tell you about it. Nevertheless, on October 17th, SPS filed its motion for a hearing, also having some of the similar objections as EPE and PNM. In particular, though, SPS brings up the fact that the final order rule would require utilities to file sensitive distribution and transmission information. And such disclosure presents serious national security implications and is overly burdensome. For that reason, SPS requested the commission review the appendix, subpart B12 and B13, to address concerns regarding national security implications of public disclosure of information required and review the burden. In particular, SPS also objects that the information required by B12 of the appendix is protected under the North American Reliability Corporation Critical Infrastructure Protection Standards and could not be disclosed. SPS also brings up a new objection that PNM and EPE did not bring up, which was wanting to amend the word rank to evaluate in part of the procurement section. They believe that ranking would constrain their authority to in the bid process. And they also object to the phrase a description and explanation of the amount and type of new resources. They also object to the 5 modeling runs similar to EPE and PNM. And lastly, SPS revisits an issue that was discussed an awful lot, I hate to say it, throughout the entire proceedings about whether or not there should be a presumption attached with acceptance of an IRP and whether that would constitute prima facie evidence of need and prudence. Next, I'll move on to EPE's motion to reopen the record. EPE requested that the commission reopen the record to present new evidence in this proceeding, and they want to present evidence regarding the burdensome of the modeling requirement. EPE also wants to present evidence that emergency procurements and small or short-term procurements should be exempt and not have to apply for variances. On October 24th, the commission, that was Monday, received numerous responses. EPE, PNM, and SPS, and I'll say this in general, all supported each other's objections and stated, for instance, PNM would say that it stated SPS's motion and then would set out what it supported, and EPA would state that it supported PNM's areas of concerns and then would set that out. So I'll move on to other parties' responses that were filed. Onward Energy on October 24th filed a response, and it argues that SPS's motion for a hearing is untimely. It said to the extent that SPS argues that the filing of an errata on September 15th somehow extended the deadline for SPS to file its motion for a hearing. Such an argument is foreclosed by 1.2.237G, which expressly provides that, quote, issuance of an errata notice shall not affect the finality of the decision or order corrected. And it notes that PNM and EPE both filed their motions on October 14th. So that proves that they knew the errata did not extend the date to file. In addition, Onward objects to the fact that the motion to reopen filed by EPE also does not comply with the commission's procedural rules because procedural rule 1.2.2.37E states that a motion to reopen the proceeding for the taking of additional evidence must be filed before the issuance of a commission order, and EPE therefore needed to file prior to the issuance of the final order, and EPE did not file until 30 days after the final order, so it's untimely and should be denied. Onward also argues that none of the motions for rehearing are based on the discovery of new evidence or change in law, which are traditional grounds for granting motion for rehearing. And many of the arguments made in the motions for rehearing are the same arguments that were the subject of extensive briefing during the comment period. For instance, the action plan, the RFP process, the role of the independent monitor, these were all subject of numerous workshops, comment periods, and public hearing. Staff filed a response on October 24th, and it responded to some, but not all, of the particular issues raised by the utilities. They did state that, as they previously stated in their filed comments, the selection of an independent monitor for the procurement process should be done at the discretion of the utility. They believe that selecting an independent monitor by the commission could put the commission at risk of potential conflicts of interest in future cases that may involve this procurement. And selection of an independent monitor could be interpreted, or it could be interpreted as implied or stated approval of the procurement process and approval of the resources in question. According to staff, quote, resource selection is more appropriately dealt with in a future general rate case, resource acquisition proceeding, CCN application, or purchase power agreement case. Their staff's next comment was regarding the reasonable access to modeling software. They agree that it should be defined, set at a specific number. Previously, they suggested the number 6. They believe that reasonable access is ambiguous. Their suggestion is, quote, the utilities shall provide utility division staff and stakeholders with 6 modeling runs per staff stakeholder using the same modeling software that they used in their own preparation. And results of those modeling runs should be provided to the participants. Thirdly, staff does not believe that an open source software would be appropriate for these types of cases because there's a lack of ability to determine or verify its accuracy, which sounds like it agrees with some of the motions for a hearing on this point. Staff took no other positions on the motions for a hearing. And finally, Interwest Energy Alliance filed its comments on Monday, October 24th. I'll try to go through these as briefly as possible. First, they disagree with PNM's assertion that the new rule includes numerous mandates that will result in the loss of utility discretion and management prerogative. They believe the rule does not intrude on utility management prerogative. They also believe the rule expressly provides that comments on the RFP shall be considered and may or may not be incorporated by the utility. The rule only provides for comments which result in recommendations rather than an approval or disapproval by the commission. The rule states that the utility retains the burden to demonstrate prudence of the procurement in a subsequent case. Interwest has no particular objection to the 5 requirements. And they point out the 5 modeling runs. They point out that there's the variance provision that could be applied. Third, they also state that you could exempt emergency and temporary procurements. Fourth, LES disagrees with P&M's assertion that the new rule doesn't adequately consider other relevant statutes and rules. Regarding EPE's assertion that the IRP rule will require EPE to move away from least cost system planning and resource acquisition, and their assertion, EPE's assertion that it would be forced to procure separate resources for New Mexico and Texas with significant cost increases. LES informs that EPE has ignored Rule 17.7.3.8D, which requires that multi-jurisdictional utilities shall include in its IRP a description of its resource planning requirements in the other states where it operates, and a description of how it is coordinating the IRP with its out-of-state resource planning requirements. So LES concludes that the commission will take multi-jurisdictional issues into account. And LES correctly points out that New Mexico and or Texas are not required to fashion its statutes and policies to match those of adjoining states, and some inconsistencies between how individual states approach transition, energy transition is going to be inevitable. Regarding SPS's assertion that they requested that the results of the IRP be used as prima facie evidence of need and prudence in subsequent proceedings, which the commission, as I stated, discussed in all of its workshops and comments. LES correctly points out that the issue was addressed at length, and some commenters opposed the inclusion of the rebuttable presumption of prudence. Some supported it, and the commission decided not to include it, and that this issue does not need to be revisited. Next, LES disagrees with SPS's assertion that the statement of need uses the word type of new resources and thus somehow arbitrarily disallows other resources. Next, SPS's request to change the word evaluate bids, and from the way it's stated now, it's stated rank bids. LES believes that comment may have merit, could be considered in the future. LES addresses SPS's assertion that the rule mandates disclosure of sensitive distribution and transmission information, as I stated before, in B12 and B13 of the appendix, and that poses serious national security implications. LES agrees that such information should be protected. However, correctly points out that the confidentiality provisions of section 17.7.3.15 could be used, and SPS does not explain why those confidentiality provisions are insufficient. So based upon all of the filings, the proposed order would partially grant and partially deny SPS's motions for rehearing. The commission would grant rehearing on the following issues. First, whether and how to limit the required number of model runs and access to modeling software to a reasonable level. Two, whether and how to define the role, authority, selection process of the appointed stakeholder process facilitator and cost recovery for the facilitator. Whether and how to require, this is the third one, whether and how to require utilities to provide technical characteristics of new resources identified in the statement of need rather than the phrase type of resource, which SPS objected to. Whether and how to amend certain rule language to appropriately reflect evaluation of bids rather than the current rules requirement to rank bids. Fourth, sorry. I believe this is fourth. Whether and how to lengthen the amount of time from 75 days to 120 or 145 days to provide the independent monitor with an evaluation of proposals in the RFP, and whether and how to grant exemptions for emergency procurements and temporary procurements, which and those procurements which are less than 200 megawatts, instead of requiring utilities to apply for variances for these procurements. And EPE's motion to reopen the record is denied based upon the fact that it does not comply with the rules requirements to file it before the order. And there is also, as Interwest stated, all of these issues were vetted fully, completely, and there is no need to reopen the record. So for both of those reasons, procedurally and substantively, the motion to reopen is denied. And I stand for questions.
So.
Commissioner Fishman, sorry, do you have a question?
So just to sum up and sure I'm understanding the order completely, is basically what we're saying is there is all of the issues have been thoroughly vetted in prior comments and testimony as part of the rulemaking process. We don't need more information to revisit those areas where suggestions are being made to modify the rule. We've got plenty of evidence on the record that we can make that decision without reopening the record. Is that correct, Judy?
Yes, that is correct.
And then secondly, we're not including all of the issues that were created as objections because some of them seem to be objections that are based on the rule as it was originally presented rather than the rule that we actually promulgated, where we responded to a lot of really excellent input. And so some of those comments seem to be not understanding that the rules already address those issues. And therefore we don't see any need to revisit them. So we're just revisiting the ones where we feel, okay, as a matter of judgment, we can relook at the record and tighten this up and make some final improvements.
Correct.
Is that a good way of summarizing what we're doing here?
Yes, we're very judiciously appreciating some suggestions to improve the final rule, but do not feel the need to revisit every single issue because they were completely vetted and we have a record established on them and there's no need to revisit them. The only other issue that might be the commission might want to entertain, besides the ones that I've stated, is the 6 months for the stakeholder process that P&M requested be either lengthened or some flexibility added, but there was really no particular suggestion as to flexibility. I mean, there is the variance provision if they actually do need more time and can't complete it within 6 months. So I just want to add that comment.
Judy, excuse me for interrupting, Steve. Judy, if you're tapping your fingers on the keys,
Oh, no,
it just makes a noise.
I'm just typing.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Just
Okay.
so I
You probably
can
need to.
take notes, basically.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Steve, I didn't mean to interrupt. I assume you have something more to say.
Yeah. And on the 6 month issue, we've made the process so much more specific and direct. And, one of the big issues that was raised during testimony was that these IRPs, by the time they get approved, if they go through the old process, and particularly particularly if we allow for presumption, that by the time you get an IRP done, it's already obsolete. And that one of the things we needed to do was come up with a more prompt and expedited process that when we get the IRP out, it's still relevant and that it's appropriate to be doing an RFP based on it. And so I just think it's really incumbent on folks who are participating to come prepared to the IRP and be ready to come up with something in 6 months. That's a long time. And a lot of those issues that are considered in an IRP, really a utility is reviewing them, I hope, all the time if they're managing their process well. So I just find it really hard to take a look and say, hey, we need to lengthen this process. We should always be looking for ways to make it shorter.
Thank you. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any comments? Commissioner Maestas, I see you looking studious there. Any thoughts or questions?
I'm always studious. No questions at this point.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, any questions or comments for Judy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's a good communication coming from utility companies. We're talking about the procurement process, whether it's fair and reasonable. I appreciate that. I appreciate P&M coming forward, El Paso Electric coming forward, and SPS. You are certainly, you can certainly provide your comments and your concerns regarding the IRP process. But all in all, I think our General Counsel's office has done a good review. And I think the bottom line that I would like to state is that there's going to be certain concerns that's highly recommended from certain utility companies. The one that I have concern about is the conflict of interest for the independent review. I think the utility companies stated a good point on that, where the commission might be overreaching. So those are my comments, but I'm ready to vote on this, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Let's see, Commissioner Byrd, do you have any comments? Have we lost him? Commissioner Byrd, can you hear me? Well, we may
Madam
have,
Chair, I am not seeing,
yeah, I
I don't
agree.
think I am seeing the phone number that he was originally connected with right now.
Yeah, I think he's probably lost connectivity. Okay, well, fine. I concurred with something Commissioner Fishman said, but now I don't remember what it was. But in any case, Judy, no, I think you did a good job going through all the comments, and I agree with the bases for which we're you're proposing that we have a rehearing. So I don't have further comments at this point. If nobody else does, I'd like to request someone to make a motion. Okay, I'll second it. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, I'm going to call Commissioner Byrd, but I believe he is not on the line.
Yeah.
Commissioner Byrd. Okay, moving on. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
The motion and order passed 4-0 with Commissioner Byrd not present.
Thank you
Madam
very
Chair.
much, Judy. Yes, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
From time to time, I do have difficulty when my phone call drops on the Zoom call. So I think we should allow Commissioner Byrd to cast his vote once he's back online, if it's possible. But I'll let you make that decision, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Well, I guess I would ask General Counsel if Commissioner Byrd returns to the meeting before it's over, can we record his vote on this matter?
We could, if the commission wanted to go through someone would have to make a motion to revote, and then you'd have to vote on that motion. Then you'd have to make another motion to adopt the order, and then you do another vote. In the alternative, he can also just make his comments.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, this is not the actual final rule. It would be brought back next week, hopefully, or the following week. And he could vote on the final rule at that time. This is just granting rehearing on several issues. However, if he wanted to add rehearing on another issue, then you could go through the process as I stated, which is a motion to place this back on the table, and then a vote on that, and then a motion to do the order again, and maybe potentially revise it. So you have several different options.
Okay, but when you say place back on the table, you don't mean to table the motion.
No.
Yeah, you mean something else.
I may not be saying the right word, but Commissioner Maestas is our parliamentarian. He probably knows the right word. I think the motion is to bring it back on the table.
Carl says it's a motion to reconsider. Okay. All right, well, we'll see what happens.
It could be done by any of the commissioners. It has to be done by one of the prevailing commissioners, but all of the commissioners voted the same way. So you could reconsider and have a vote on that motion. And then if that passed, then you could have a vote on the order again.
Okay. Well, if we manage to have him return, wait, I see a new telephone line here. Commissioner Byrd, are you present? No, well.
Yes, I am back.
You're here? Oh, is that Commissioner Byrd? Okay. Commissioner Byrd, we just voted on whether or not to have a rehearing, and we approved Judy's order to grant a partial rehearing on some of the matters that were raised by the interveners, but not all of them. And Commissioner Vicente Aguilar spoke up on your behalf to ask if we could include your vote. And we were just discussing the procedure. Right now, the vote passed on a 4-0 with you not being present. Are you comfortable with that, or would you like to have your vote recorded on this matter?
I didn't miss much. Mostly missed the vote. So, yeah, I was going to vote aye.
You want us to repeat the vote, or did you say you were going to vote on it?
Yeah, I was going to vote in favor, but it doesn't matter. It's 4-0. It's not like I would change it anyway. It'd just be 5-0.
Okay, fine. Well, then we'll dispense with going through that extra process. And thank you very much for letting us know. And I'm glad you were able to come back. I've had connectivity issues myself today, so it's one of those days. Okay. Well, great. Thank you very much. And so we'll proceed, Judy. And thank you for that very thorough presentation. I appreciate it. Moving on, we're going to move on to Roman number 11, discussion and potential action. This has to do with P&M Advice Notice 587. P&M Advice Notice 587, Original Rider 45B EDR Contract, Bueno Foods. And we'll have a presentation by three people: Georgette Ramey of staff, Judith Amer and Michael Smith, both of OGC. And they're going to make a presentation of a staff memo, and there will be a potential action on the advice notice. So I see Georgette. Are you teeing us up here? Georgette, are you starting?
I'm ready to start whenever you would like me to, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right now would be just fine.
Okay, well, good morning,
Good
Madam
morning.
Chair, Commissioners. I'm here to present my advice notice memo that was dated September 27th, 2022, regarding P&M's advice notice number 587. And that's original rider 45B. It is an economic development rate rider, and it was filed by P&M on July 1st. And it is with El Encanto Inc., DBA Bueno Foods, and it requested an effective date of November 1st. The commission approved the original rider 45 economic development rider applicable to rate numbers 4B 5B, 30B, and 35B in PNM's rate case number 1500261-UT. And then it was approved to an incremental cost of providing the service to the economic development rate customer. And so the current applicable EDR rate was approved in case number 16-00276 UT. And so this economic development rider only applies to certain classes of customers. And so 4B, just for your reference, is a large power service, time of use. 5B is large service for customers with greater than or equal to 8,000 kilowatt minimum at 115 kilovolts. I'm not an engineer, but this is how it's described. And then 30B is for large service manufacturing, and that is for greater than or equal to 30,000 kilowatts minimum at distribution voltage. And then 35B is a large power service greater than or equal to 3,000 kilowatts time of use rate. And so these class of customers, retail customers of PNMs, are allowed to enter into contracts that establish a discounted demand charge over a period of 4 or 5 years to encourage new industry to locate to New Mexico and to facilitate further investment by existing PNM customers in their businesses in New Mexico. And so the Bueno Foods contract is for an existing customer, and they take service from PNM under rate 4B, which is the large power service time of use rate. And so the contract actually requests an extended term. And so under the EDR, you can have a standard term of 4 years upon which the discount rates are applied, and then it goes to the standard, the non-discounted rate for the remaining 4 years. So it's a total of 8 years, or the extended term is a 5-year EDR discount, and then the remaining 5 years is the full demand charge applied. So the total contract term is 10 years, and that's what's being requested here. The application that was filed on July 1 was supported by the affidavit of affirmation of Aaron Brash, and he is the senior pricing analyst at PNM. And he provided the analysis used to support the request filed. Mr. Brash verifies all the eligibility requirements and load demands needed to serve the contract. And let's see, that is attachment A, which is the affirmation. And the EDR rate is designed, as I stated earlier, to recover the incremental cost of providing service to the customer. So part of attachment A has 5 exhibits. And exhibit 1 is the Bueno Foods application, which was submitted to PNM in February of this year. Exhibit 2 is the Bueno Foods signed affidavit of Jacqueline Baca, who is the president of El Encanto, Inc. And then exhibit 3 is the Bueno Foods EDR contract itself that has all the terms of the agreement. Exhibit 4 is the annual revenue requirement that will be needed to provide the service. And then exhibit 5 is the breakdown of the infrastructure costs required to serve the load. And let's see, on pages 3 to 8 of that affidavit, Mr. Brash explains how the various sections of Rider 45 applies to the Bueno Foods and the contract terms that are set forth within. On page 4, Mr. Brash discusses the discounts in terms of the contract at paragraphs 11 and 12. On page 5, Mr. Brash discusses the methodology used to perform the calculations for incremental demand revenue at paragraph 15. On page 6, Mr. Brash discusses the terms for monthly billing and annual reviews to ensure the rates will be charged correctly as required under the contract. As far as staff knows, there were not any protests to this filing. It was quite complete. And so staff recommended not that the EDR rider 45B become effective through the operation of law on November 1st, and that it would be allowed to take effect as requested. And I stand for questions, and my understanding, we do have staff members from PNM also available if you have any questions.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ramey. Oh, yes, Judy?
I would like to state that it is, this is Michael Smith's matter and he's unavailable. However, he stated to me that he spoke with PNM and informed them that if there were any questions that they could answer because there were no objections and it is not a litigated matter.
So you're saying Michael asked PNM to come and answer questions? Is that what?
He had a discussion with PNM that if they wanted to ask PNM questions, they could be available.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, I do see Mark right there, but if anybody has any questions, does anybody have any questions from this presentation? Judy, were you going to present the OGC position on this then?
Yes, if you would like me to.
Okay, well, let me just confirm. Commissioners, does anybody have a question for Ms. Ramey? Please speak up. I'm not hearing any. So we'll go on to OGC's summation or presentation.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the commission, as Georgette just detailed, this matter comes before you today on PNM's advice notice number 587, which would implement an economic development rider contract with El Encanto Inc. DBA Bueno Foods, which I will refer to as Bueno. This is pursuant to the Public Utility Act, Section 62626, and PNM's first revised rider number 45, their economic development rider, which is known as rider number 45. The advice notice will become effective on November 1st unless suspended by the commission prior to that date. That is the reason that it's on the agenda today. Our next meeting is November 2nd. The commission ceased the practice, the previous practice of having all advice notices presented at public meetings, at open meetings. The reason that this advice notice was included was because it seeks to implement a specific economic development rate rider, which has not been previously considered by the commission in a docketed case. Therefore, this is a determination for the commission to make. It's a substantive determination rather than a determination as to whether or not an advice notice complies with a previous order or any of the other previous filed advice notices.
Judy?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
I'm not sure I understood what you're getting at. You were saying that this rider has not been considered in a previous
N-
docketed case?
No. The P&M's current economic development first revised rate rider 45 was approved in P&M rate case 16-0007276.
And that
Okay.
pertained to Bueno as well?
That was just the general economic development rate rider.
Right.
This is a specific company.
Use.
A previous economic development rate for American Gypsum Company was approved in case number 17-00164. And in that case, there was a final order approving the rate rider. In this case, we have testimony, and the commission could let the advice notice go into effect as in accordance with staff's memo, because it complies with form and it also complies with applicable statutes. And staff recommended that this advice notice for Bueno not be suspended and take effect for service on November 1st. And in addition, P&M complied with notice provisions. They served the advice notice on the New Mexico Attorney General and all counsel and pro se parties to its most recent rate case, which is case number 16-00276. And no protests were filed objecting to the implementation of advice notice number 587. So for all of those reasons, looking at the affidavit and exhibits supporting P&M's advice notice number 587 and staff's review, and based upon the lack of protests, it is the Office of General Counsel's recommendation that the commission not suspend this advice notice and allow it to go into effect by operation of law. In order to do this, the commission need not make a motion or an order, or no action is required. As staff's memo indicates, the rates that become effective by operation of law without a hearing by the commission shall not be construed to bear the approval of the commission and may be subject to inquiry by the commission at any time.
Judy, you say they shall not be what? Subject to the
They may be subject to inquiry
inquiry. Okay.
in a future matter.
I see. So it's your recommendation that we allow it to go into effect. I have a question though. I haven't looked at the statutory language for a long time. I thought economic development rates were to encourage new business in the state. Bueno's been around for a long time, but is it still, able to get? Is it still, what's the word? Eligible to enjoy that kind of rate? Even so,
The statute states, and I'm quoting now, and this is from 62-626. It allows for special rates or tariffs in order to prevent the loss of customers, to encourage customers to expand present facilities and operations in New Mexico, and to attract new customers where necessary or appropriate, to promote economic development in New Mexico. So it's for all three of those activities: expand present facilities, encourage expansion, prevent the loss of customers, as well as what you said, Commissioner, attract new customers.
I see. So is there some attestation that this is to encourage expansion or something to that effect, or whatever the reason is?
I have no direct knowledge of that, and perhaps either Georgette or PNM has knowledge of that.
That information was included with the application, that it was the reason that the company considered entering into this long-term contract was for them to expand their business.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Ramey.
You're welcome,
Okay,
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair,
okay, yes, Commissioner Fishman.
it's a 10-year contract and the special rates in place for 5 years. I assume that means, and tell me if this is true, that the parties could renegotiate the contract at any time and basically continuously apply for this special rate. Is that correct or not?
Commissioner Fishman, not quite. The terms of the discounts are spelled out in the contract. In exhibit. Exhibit A, which is page A1. The EDR discount is spelled out. So there would not be any changes until the end of the term of the contract. So in either case, whether it's a standard contract or the extended contract. So for this extended contract term, the first year, the discount in the demand charge is 50%. And it actually is for the months, the first month through the 12th month. And then for the second year, the 13th through the 24th month, it's 35%. In year 3 and 4, months 25 through 48, it's 20%. And then in the 5th year, the 48th through 60th month, it will be 10%. And then it will continue on for the next 5 years without any discount. And then when you get to the end of the full 10 years, then the contract can be renewed. But it stands right now for the full term as stated.
Okay. And I'll direct this then to Judy, just kind of a lawyer's opinion. Is it possible for the parties after 5 years to say, oh, let's renegotiate? And then put the same discounts in place so that for the next 5 years, they also get these discounts.
Commissioner Fishman, without having the contract directly in front of me, I can't answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
That may be a PNM question.
Well, do we have the contract? That's part of the record, isn't it? Isn't that part of the submission? Can you pull that up in the appendix or something, Judy? I thought I saw a bunch of stuff in that appendix.
So all I want to do, I'm not going to vote no on this.
Well,
but I just want to point out that if we're not looking at that, what these contracts really are is an open door for large customers to negotiate service at cost while everyone else subsidizes them.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally, if that's the law, that's the law. But I personally think that's something that the legislature should revisit if this thing could be exploited. And, we don't need to do a lot of research now. I'm going to vote yes on this. The law is the law. But that's something that we should revisit with the legislature. What really turns into an open-ended subsidy. for these companies. And that's the only reason I raised this issue, just to alert folks to my concern.
I appreciate that. And that's why I want to hear the answer to your question to get some clarity on this point. And I'd like to ask, in the meantime, Judy, are you able to find that contract anywhere?
Yeah, I did find the contract. It was attached to the advice notice.
Okay.
And it checked the box and it says extended term contract. The term of this contract shall commence upon the EDR discount effective date. And unless terminated earlier pursuant to Section 5, which you would have to read, there's probably termination for cause, termination without cause, and probably a lot of different procedures for termination. That being said, this contract shall remain in effect for a total of 10 years from the EDR discount effective date, contract term. The contract term shall include an initial period of 5 years during which the EDR discount shall be in effect, extended EDR duration, plus an additional 5 years during which P&M shall provide and the customer shall continue taking from P&M service at the full tariff rate under the applicable rate schedule without the benefit of the EDR discount. So it sounds like the EDR discount for the first 5 years. This contract is not subject to extension or renewal and shall automatically terminate at the end of the contract term. Customer hereby certifies that an additional 12-month period is necessary to attract the new or incremental economic development load.
Addition to what? Additional meaning the subject of this contract or something else?
Yeah, to me, that's a very interesting statement. And I would have to read the entire contract to understand what that means. That being said, there are, if you look at the termination clause, paragraph 5.1, there's no contract termination during the EDR duration exceptions, except as otherwise provided herein. The contract shall not be subject to termination until expiration of the extended EDR. But again, there's a lot of different exceptions. And so it would definitely depend on if there was an exception for termination as to whether P&M or the customer has the right to terminate it prior to the 5 years.
I guess I don't understand why it would have to last 10 years if the discount provisions only last for 5. And the remaining 5 years is just a contract to pay what they're required to pay under the law. Otherwise, the full tariff. Right?
I agree. It's not that is not clear from the contract itself.
So, Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
It might be an attempt to say, well, you can't come back for a discount for another 5 years. And that's P&M trying to put a lid on it. I just don't know how, in practice, enforceable it really is if Buena Vista comes back, or Bueno Foods, excuse me, comes back and says, gee, we've had we can relocate and we're going to get a cheaper power rate. What are you going to do for us? And if P&M is put under that kind of pressure, does this provision really hold up? And my practical experience tells me no. But, until the lawyers look at it, we don't really know. But I just wanted to point out that these can be abused, and in practice, a lot of times it just turns into it can turn into a permanent subsidy for these large customers that a small residential customer doesn't enjoy.
I recall that from a long time ago when we had one of these, and I do agree with you that it could be a risk, but it sounded like, at least from the language Judy read, that it was not intended in this contract because there was rather firm language there to the effect that the full tariff would apply for the last 5 years. But what I'm not sure about is Judy mentioning something about exceptions that she'd have to read the whole contract for.
Yeah.
So is that correct, Judy?
Exceptions to termination.
Oh, well,
Because that would be, when you read the term, that it stated what the term was, 10 years, unless terminated. And then you'd have to read all of the termination clause, which is several pages.
So if it were terminated after 5 years, then you're saying they can enter into a new agreement if they wanted to?
Once the agreement's terminated, it's terminated.
Right. They'd have to enter into a new agreement. Oh, right. But does the statute prohibit having more than one of the same identical?
The statute doesn't has the criteria that I stated. Would have to be attract new business, encourage expansion of an existing business, or prevent loss of an existing business.
But it doesn't speak to whether or not you can have serial contracts with the same business.
It does not specify something to the effect that you cannot have serial contracts with the same business, as long as the same business, as long as you're doing one of those 3 criteria in the statute. In other words, to keep encouraging their expansion, you could have, it appears that there would be no prohibition against some sort of a serial contract.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Judy. And Steve, thank you for raising that issue. I think I agree with you. It's something the legislature really probably ought to look at.
Madam Chair.
What's that? Yes, Commissioner Byrd.
So there is a prohibition. It's just not by us. It would be by the shareholders. The shareholders don't want to continue to not make money. So the board and shareholders would have a say in that. At some point, they want to see the return on this investment. They're investing in this company knowing that in 5 to 10 years and further, they'll be making more money from the sale of more electricity than they currently are. So there is a backstop. There's not a permanent desire to float companies for free, because the shareholders eventually start to have a say.
Well, I appreciate that. However, I don't know if we could always rely on customer protection based on board interests. Depends on the board if they're aware of it and so forth. And that's why we exist. But I do appreciate it. Yes,
Madam Chair, I'm going to respectfully disagree with Commissioner Byrd, even though we're going to both vote the same way on this. But since the utility in its rate cases gets a revenue requirement based on its customer base and it gets a guaranteed return, they don't suffer by giving these discounts to these companies. They simply shift the cost to other ratepayers. And so all I'm pointing out is, no, the company doesn't take a loss, I don't believe. And I don't really want to go arguing for a long time, but I think when you look at the regulatory structure, the result is the company doesn't take the hit. It's other customers who don't have the benefit of the discount that take the hit. And someday, Commissioner Byrd, you can prove me wrong, but that's how I see it.
Okay, well, any other commissioners have any comments on this? Commissioner Maestas, any thoughts?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, any thoughts?
No comments. Thank you.
Okay.
So
All
Madam
right. Well,
Chair,
yes, Commissioner.
I'd recommend we just approve the advice notice.
Okay, is that a motion? Yes, Commissioner, yes, Judy?
Not a
If-
vote, I know.
It's, if the commission does not desire to suspend the advice notice, then the commission does not need to do any action at this point. It can follow the staff's recommendation, which is to allow the advice notice to not be suspended and go into effect by operation of law on November.
Okay, so no vote needed if we want to permit the rate to go into effect, correct?
A vote is only needed if there was a motion to suspend the advice notice.
Okay, so does any commissioner desire to make such a motion? If not, then we can move on from this issue.
Correct.
Thank you, Ms. Ramey, for a great presentation of it. I'm sorry I dragged it out a little longer, but
Oh,
I had
no
to get on my
worries,
soapbox
Commissioner.
for a minute.
You weren't the only one, Steve. Okay. And I'm not hearing any. Yes, thank you very much, Georgette. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
It's a good explanation. So, and I don't hear any commissioner piping up wanting to move to suspend the rate. So we'll move on. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so item number 12, communications with Chief of Staff, who has a legislative update.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Nice to see everybody this morning. I do have a couple of legislative updates. First of all, a reminder that our FY24 budget presentation tomorrow before the Water and Natural Resources Committee. I don't anticipate any fireworks from that committee, but we are scheduled to present that request at I believe it's 1 o'clock. And then the date for our Legislative Finance Committee hearing has moved from November 16th to November 15th. And I believe that's scheduled to start at 3 p.m. So we will be making a very similar presentation to the Legislative Finance Committee on November 15th. I sent out earlier a kind of as I noted, a rough draft of a legislative wish list. I want to thank Christopher Hall for at least getting me started on that by taking notes over the last couple of months on items that have come up from individual commissioners and during commission meetings. Since then, I received Commissioner Maestas' input this morning. Thank you for that very much. Received input from Office of General Counsel yesterday afternoon. Also have some input from Mary Jane Parks and from Art O'Donnell. And so what I would suggest, respectfully suggest, Madam Chair, is that I incorporate all of those changes and try to get an updated draft to the commission. I think I can get that to you this afternoon. I don't see why not. And then have this placed back on the agenda next week as an action item for the commission. And of course, if any commissioners or any staff haven't provided input, I know, Madam Chair, you had some thoughts on some items you might want to have included on the list. You're welcome to continue to get those to me, but I do think I can have an updated list by, as I mentioned, by this afternoon, or certainly no later than tomorrow, which would give everyone about a week to look it over, make sure it makes sense. And possibly, Madam Chair, if the commission wants to give direction on prioritization, that's always helpful as well. But if that sounds good, that's how we might be able to proceed.
Well, thank you very much for that information, Mr. Probst. I actually heard two things today that occurred to me might be good things to add to your list. And I welcome commissioners' reactions to this. and one would be to amend the location control statute to cover storage facilities as well as transmission facilities, since they're becoming fast becoming an integral part of transmission and distribution systems. And then another one might be, and this, I leave it up to Commissioner Fishman about how strongly he feels about it, would be to have the legislature revisit economic development rates, but to sort of make sure there's provisions that would protect against abuse of the right to have such a rate.
So, Madam Chair, I'm fine with putting it on the list. It's not a top of the list item, but something that folks should be thinking about.
Yeah.
And Madam Chair, again, what was the first one?
The first one was to include storage in the scope of the location control statute. I guess it's 9.6.3 NMSA. That issue was brought up in an earlier case, maybe the Atrisco case. There was an exception that we accepted, or an objection we accepted by Atrisco, saying that that storage wasn't considered transmission under the statute, and therefore we had no jurisdiction to require any kind of notification about its impact on the environment. So, just from a system standpoint, it makes sense that if that kind of requirement, in my mind anyhow, and that if that kind of requirement applies to the transmission lines, it can only be logical to apply it to other facilities that are being built in connection with those lines, such as storage. So that's just my suggestion. I don't know what other commissioners think about it. I guess we can confer on that when you get the complete list. Any comments on that while we're sitting here? Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be an appropriate suggestion, given the development through the Inflation Reduction Act that now offers tax credits for standalone energy storage projects. So in the next several years, I think we're going to see a proliferation of energy storage only projects. So yeah, I think that's a great suggestion.
Good. Thank you very much. That's a good supporting concept as well. So I appreciate that. Okay. Well, that's good. We have productive ideas coming out here. So we'll move on then to communications. Let's see. Was that it, Mr. Props? Is that everything you wanted to present?
That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, and it sounds like I need to get back to you with some information. I forgot that part. I thought I had made suggestions, but I'll contact you after, see what I need to do. Communications with General Counsel. Do we have any? Judy?
Madam Chair, I'm unsure if, I know Judy did have some comments that she wanted to present.
I am so sorry. I was tapping my screen, trying to unmute. We've all been there.
Yeah.
So one communication I have is regarding the grid modernization workshop. It was scheduled for October 27th, which is tomorrow, but it has now been postponed to November 3rd. I believe at 1:30. It was decided to be a hybrid meeting, a workshop, and not held in Albuquerque, with people, if they want to participate in person, could come to, it would be in Santa Fe. That being said, it was hybrid. the question that Office of General Counsel has with respect to providing notice is if there's a potential that 3 commissioners would participate in this grid modernization workshop. And we have a docket, an inquiry docket open about a potential rulemaking. Then we would recommend it being noticed similar to the way the resource adequacy inquiry workshop was. It was noticed as a special open meeting because if there's a potential for 3 commissioners to be present and participating at any time. So that's why I'm bringing this up to determine that and how we can go forward with issuing the notice, which we would like to do today because we want to give those interested persons as much advance notice as possible.
Thank you, Judy. I hope that can go out today. And I think whenever we're doing workshops, we should just, as a matter of course, issue a potential notice of quorum because commissioners don't always know what they're doing, until the last minute. And I think it's the best way to cover it. Steve's smiling, but it's true. And, and that way that gives maximum notice to the public and, accommodates the flexibility that commissioners need in their schedule. So thanks very much. And please feel free to always do a notice of potential quorum, possible quorum going forward. And I look forward to having that workshop, and I encourage the other commissioners to attend. I think it'll be really informative, and we definitely want to encourage as many listening members of the public to attend as well. We welcome input from people with an interest in this topic. So thanks very much for that, Judy.
Yes.
General Counsel. Oh, Steve, Commissioner Fishman, say something.
Yes, Madam Chair, just for the press, I want to correct one statement. Commissioners always know what they're doing. They just don't know when they're going to be doing it.
Exactly. Excuse me if I misspoke. Right.
I don't want a bad quote going out there.
I stand corrected.
So I believe my instruction is to notice this one similar to the way we did the resource adequacy workshop as a special open meeting. And that notice would go out today.
And that's occurring, is that occurring when? You said?
I believe, but someone can definitely correct me if I'm wrong. It's November 3rd, Thursday at 1:30.
Okay.
Hybrid.
So that's a week and a day from today.
Yes.
So it doesn't conflict with our open meetings, and it's hybrid, so we can attend online.
Correct.
So, I hope to see you there, Commissioner Fishman.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Were there any other notifications from General Counsel's office, Judy?
No, and I haven't received anything from anyone else, so no.
Okay, excellent. All right. Thank you very much. Moving on to communications with commissioners. Commissioners, do you have anything to communicate? Hearing, yes, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to send out a shout out to a good public hearing today on the transportation matter. If they're listening, if not, Chief of Staff, if you can please send an email to Elizabeth Jeffries, Fidel Archuleta, Kevin Bay Rodriguez, Hans Mueller. They did a wonderful job. It was very smooth, straightforward. And I also like to thank Georgette for a good presentation today and informing the commissioners about the work that she does on a daily basis. And I also like to send a shout out to the General Counsel's office, every attorney, Lori Ann. I'm receiving a lot of emails from Lori Ann. You're doing a very good job. And then we all know General Counsel's office is pretty much in need of support and to support one another, because you are pretty much in the driver's seat when it comes to the open meetings. And there's no better time to express my appreciation for all the work that everyone, the entire staff. And I know there's a number of them that I have left out, but for today's meeting, I just wanted to name the individuals that came on to do the public hearings and to cover the cases. And I am reviewing your work as week by week goes by, and I'm just very appreciative. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. And I join with you in those comments. I noticed that as well. I'm very proud of our staff. They did a very good job today. Ms. Ramey making her presentation, and absolutely the conduct of the transportation matter was, yeah, it was very smooth. I mean, they're not always that smooth. So I completely agree. And I think we have a lot to be proud of here in the staff. So, any other comments from commissioners? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.